morning, it's Chris, and I'm here at Artistic Artifacts this morning. We're having a month where we're actually promoting 3 books from our local creatives, but today it's Ann Wright, who has a new book called Roll with the Classics. It's by Landauer Publishing, and Ann shops here, and I've actually gotten the pleasure of being a tester for some of her rulers, so it's fun to actually have Ann here in person today to talk about her book, which is now, it was a pre-order, it's now in stock. The other books that we have coming are Kristen Brown's Creative Embroidery and Leslie Riley's Photo Memory books. So we're doing a lot of promotion of those, mainly because we have creative minds who have been participating in either have something in the book or actually we're going to have Sue Bentley join us a little bit later. She's our quilter here at the shop, and she's done Ann's quilting, so she's going to talk about the partnership between a long arm quilter and the designer, the quilt designer. So I'm not going to talk. Oh, one more other thing that I do want to say is we do have a comment sold, a live sale coming up. It's going to be Indonesian treasures. We've got new petite panels. We've got some T-shirts from Indonesia, a bunch of other things. So that's coming on the 23rd, live sale. So make sure you download the app and be ready to shop with us that day. Stay tuned for that. But Ann, you want to talk about your book?
Right. So I had been, like many quilters, collecting these lovely little jelly rolls for years, and they were just gathering in my nice little antique Hoosier cupboard, and I decided I needed to do something. So about that time, Landauer contacted me about doing yet another book, so I decided I would do a book using the jelly rolls, and we called it Roll with the Classics because I wanted to show how you could use your favorite quilt patterns from the quilting tradition and yet use the jelly rolls. And I did a lot of it by sewing things together. Like on the cover quilt shows, I sewed 2 strips together, and then I cut flying geese triangles using my little triangle rule. You can see the tape is still on there where I marked my cutting line because I'm just the kind of quilter who I would do a few and cut a few, and I was afraid I would cut the wrong line, so I always mark with tape.
Where is that quilt? You didn't bring it.
I didn't bring it.
Okay.
I'm using it at home.
Oh, that's good to know.
It's on my sofa.
Yes, perfect.
And then I made this Tulip Pink. I got this marvelous jelly roll here. Not that I didn't have enough jelly rolls at home. I had to come and purchase some. And I made this crisscross quilt. And in order to do that, I used another Creative Goods ruler to cut the final square. So, but my most fun was actually using my own rulers. I never get tired. And I love doing the hexagons. And Chris and I were just talking about the hexagon quilt. I sewed these around in what they call a patient's corner thing. So each one kind of overlaps, and the instructions are in the book to show you how to do that. It's so simple. And you'll notice that all of my instructions, I draw all the illustrations myself. But I don't really like to read a lot of instructions.
Neither do I. I'm a picture person. I'm a visual.
Me too. I'm all visual. So I like to make my instructions with enough visual things so that if you don't want to read the instructions, you can make it just looking at the pictures, the diagrams.
Well, the first thing I noticed when I was looking through the book is it was like, oh, there are no wide seams in these hexagons. It's actually making it almost like a log cabin to go around the edges.
Exactly.
It was like, ooh, I could make that.
Yes, and to sew the rows together, you can see I made long rows and used triangles in between using my triangle ruler. The other one. I've got
I think of this one here.
That one. This one. And I was able to then not have any Y seams because I can do Y seams, I just don't like to. So that was my hexagon quilt. So that was great fun to do. And then, but the first quilt I made for the book, you know, I'm so basic. My favorite quilt is the double 9-patch. I mean, please. When I took my first quilting lesson, I thought I was too experienced in sewing to make a 9-patch quilt. So I didn't make the first quilt in the class. But since then, I've come to truly love 9 patches. So the double 9-patch just shows you put a big 9 patch. I put 5 9 patches together and then made a great big 9 patch with it. So that's the double 9 patch. And this is, I think, the first quilt I sent to Sue to quilt. And she's going to talk about our quilting experiences together in a minute. But so that was the first one. And then I had enough of that fabric left over. Where did we put that table runner? Oh, here it is.
Right here.
That I made a little table runner, and the thought came to me that not any of these jelly rolls did I use 100%. And so what I did was, in the book, if you go to the back, where we hide that book, I called it Leftovers, but they wanted to be a little bit more elegant at the publishing company, so they called it Bonus Projects.
The bonus projects, yes.
Mm-hmm. So
Some small little ones, yeah.
Lots of pillows, placemats, and even tote bags were made for the bonus projects with the leftover strips, because I don't know any quilts where I've actually used all of the strips in one quilt. And that was a baby quilt I made. I'm just waiting for somebody I know to have a baby, actually. Someone out there's got to do it. And I used my 12-inch log cabin ruler. There you go.
Oh, no, that's your pineapple ruler.
Oh, yeah, but this is pineapple.
Okay.
You're right.
Okay.
I used a 12-inch pineapple ruler to make this quilt with
Let's
another
open it up here.
K-facet.
This is with parakeet, right?
The parakeet, yep. His thing he calls parakeet, which is available here at the shop. And I just love this. And I just think some nice little baby would love to have that quilt someday when I get an opportunity to give one away. So, anyway, whoops.
So then you used your leftovers
to make
the pit.
I mean, it was actually made 2 pillows, but I only brought 1. Yeah. So, almost every quilt has
There's always
a
leftovers.
project. There's always leftovers.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and I've really gotten into making tote bags too with my leftovers, and
So have I. There's a lot of them that it's just, this is the perfect size. I've been making those Japanese rice pouches with them. They're perfect to use
perfect
leftovers.
For that.
Yeah.
So,
and then the other one I like to use, and this is actually, is this using your rosy tote pattern?
No, it's using. I have a really simple gusset bag, and I've made gussets so simple. Once again, you don't have to read the instructions to make that gusset. It's all pictured in the book, and I like the screening because it's really strong.
So this one's in the book too?
Yep, that one's in the book.
Boy, it's loaded with projects.
I know, and it's leftovers from my K-facet quilt that I made, Memories quilt, which I know my granddaughter isn't watching this morning. It's her wedding quilt. She's getting married in June. So I know where she is, and it's not watching the program. But if she watches it again on Facebook at a later date, she's going to know before I send it to her, isn't she?
It's a beautiful wedding present.
Yes, it is. And she's a blue and white person, so.
Oh, it'd be gorgeous.
Yeah.
Treasure. That is a memory, but a treasured gift as well.
Right.
Yep.
So anyways, I tried to use a variety of different quilt patterns and things from very simple for beginners to, I did this one called the Anvil, which is just a little bit more complicated, and had fun with that one too. So, and it's a strippy quilt. I love strippy quilts. They're just so much fun.
What do you mean by strippy quilt?
Well, the blocks, instead of going like in sashings, they go in long strips, which is also what I did.
So these 3 you put into a strip and then cut.
Then
using the ruler.
Right. I made a center and 2 sides, and then I cut them 6.5 inches, and then I cut my I had a jelly roll. I cut obviously 2.5 inches wide. I made a 2.5-inch square and stood it on the corner there, and then I also cut these rectangles and put it
Up
there.
there.
So that's how the anvil block is actually like this.
So you have basically 3 different colorways of your strips. Using the jelly rolls, 2.5-inch strips, and then you add the corners
Yeah,
to
after they
those.
were sewn together, I sewed that across and then
Yeah.
clipped it off on the back.
I love making those too because you really are. It's pretty quick and easy. This is a nice pattern.
It was very
I like
quick.
this.
And then I did on this strippy quilt. I did these alternate rows. So and Sue, Sue, come on up here. She's my long arm quilter. I moved to the DC area 10 years ago, and I discovered Sue on the internet.
10 years ago, we just found out about her like 2 years ago.
I've been incognito.
Why didn't you tell us earlier?
So Sue's my long arm quilter, and I found her on the internet, and I started having her quilt my quilts, and now the first quilt she quilted in the book was the double 9 patch, and I said something with feathers. I love feather quilting designs, so she did the fancy feathers. But that one, I said to do something that reminded me. I grew up in South Florida, and we have a lot of Art Deco architecture down there. So I wanted something more geometric, and that would look like.
You can't tell on the back of this one because you've put on a really.
But I can always trust Sue. I say, this is what I think. Do something like this. And she just does something like this that I love.
I don't even have to tell her that. I just say, do what you want.
Okay.
And I've been thrilled every single time she's done something.
So Sue has made this top from the book, and I see she's bought thread to quilt with.
This is the blue and white quilt. Once I had quilted hers, I said, I've got to make my own. And so I haven't finished the borders yet, but this is very similar to the Memories quilt in the book. Now, one of the things I know about Jean Ann is she loves color, and she likes colored thread. And so I too like colored thread. I love Wonderful thread, which they carry here in the shop. This is confetti, which is a medium weight. And I'm looking at purple or blue, and I'm going to do something floral, probably pull in these type of flowers, which is what I did on yours.
Right.
And it'll all quilt up really nicely.
How about a variegated?
I could use a variegated also. And
Right.
But with both of those colors in it.
Right. And actually some would have even some of the little greens. So that's another option be great to try. And I'm going to see if I have...
She's got all the papers for all the things she did for me. And
right. And so I think this one is something like... I know it's not quite this pattern, but Dancing Violets quilts up very nicely. And when you do the colors and you look at these flowers, it has the same feel as the quilt.
right.
So that's how you decide. So do you look at your designs that you have or potential designs, and by looking at the quilt and saying, what's the quilt telling me it needs?
Sometimes, yes, that's generally how I do it. Of course, I'm always have a long list of designs I want to try, and if I have an excuse to purchase them, that works out nice.
Well, I was going to say, we've had that experience a couple times. Oh, I have something that I think would be perfect for this quilt. So we go for it.
And then other times, I look and try to find what will work. The one we had before, that one over there, the Anvil quilt, she said something kind of Art Deco. And so that was, I didn't really have something I felt was Art Deco, but this is together. And
It's like a chain.
It's like a chain, and it fit
you
very
can see
nicely with that.
So back to the album quilt. This is also a K-facet roll, and it's available here in the store. And so
I think that's Emperor.
yeah, I had a block left over when I finished mine, so that's why I made this tote bag. So this is, I wanted to call it leftovers, but the publisher thought that wasn't elegant enough, so we called it bonus. To me, they're leftovers, and I just don't want them hanging around my sewing room. I want something.
Well, you know who can always use those leftovers?
Who?
Miss Judy.
Oh, okay.
I put all my...
Oh, I can start sending them to her?
I put them in a bag and drop them off, and she makes her fabric postcards and scrap bags, and yes.
That will keep her out of trouble, won't it?
Well, this uses...
No, it won't.
No, it won't. Chris says it will not.
This one uses one jelly roll strip per block. So you
Right.
can, with a whole jelly roll, you can make a much bigger quilt, or you can do lots of
this
bonus
is nice.
projects.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a nice crib size, wall hanging size.
Right.
But then you're going to put a border on
Once
it.
you put a nice 6-inch border on it, it
Yeah.
will be a nice quilt to put over your sofa, or
Yeah.
hold up at the foot of your bed and pull up during nap time.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then, my other granddaughter has been telling me that I have to start working with more modern colors. And they happen to be like gray and, you know, all the neutrals. So I made this one in the colors that she suggested. And it's so simple. I mean, the rankest beginner can make this quilt. I combined Patience corner blocks with rail fence blocks. And then I just arranged them so they looked woven. And really the colors, the print colors carry the day.
So this is another strip quilting.
Yeah, it's all strip quilting. So I would sew the long strips together, and then I would cut them up into the 6.5
Squares,
inch
yeah.
block.
And that's what they call a rail fence.
A rail fence, the
Some
3
of
long
us
strips.
don't know that.
Oh, this is the rail fence, and this is the Patience corners. And the Patience corners is because it's put together like the
It's
hexagon.
like a log. Well, I bet it's also like a log cabin.
Exactly. So I did those, and I sewed the long strips together and then sliced them up. Don't slice your strips before you sew them, because it's too easy to lose a piece or whatever. So I found that first I like to sew all my strips together, and then I like to cut my pieces.
And how did you quilt this one?
This is with that Dancing Violets
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
pattern, and
And
one
isn't
of
it
the
pretty?
reasons I picked that is that this flower has sort of a square shape to it,
Ah.
so it complements the blocks in the quilt.
And I like that this one shows the quilting up because you've used a contrasting thread,
Right.
whereas in the Art Deco one, it was a neutral thread,
right.
and
To give
it
it
was
texture.
Yeah,
And I like when I have a quilt that's totally geometric like this one. There's no, curves or triangles in this quilt. I like to use the more floral quilting design because I just think the contrast
yeah. No, it's,
enhances the quilt. It's like my little baby-to-be quilt. Not that I'd be making hints to anybody in my family. But
there'll be other quilts by the time they have babies.
it's
so.
very geometric, and yet she used a very, what did you call this, Sue?
This is Paisley
the
Passion. I
colors.
think.
Yeah, it's called Paisley Passion, and it's a little bit like a feather design, but not quite, so you can see there. So, all in all, it was a lot of fun. And I used this K-Facet. I love his fabric, so I used that jelly roll to make this one.
And this is, so you use the 50 weight Wonderfill for both your bobbin and your top?
No, I use Deco Bob in my bobbin.
Okay. The Deco Bob is the 80 weight, and then the 50 weight on the top.
Right.
And then if, for those who actually sometimes, I know you don't use it on the long arm, but the 12 weight, if you're using a 12 weight to do your quilting, probably on your domestic machine, you want to use a 50 weight in your bobbin. The Deco Bob, which is an awesome thread for piecing and for quilting, is, I use it all the time in both the top and the bottom.
50 weight?
No, the 80 weight,
The
the
80
Deco
weight.
Bob. Because when you piece your seams, because it's
Yeah.
80 weight, they lay even flatter.
Oh, I'm going to have to try that.
Plus,
See, I've learned
it
something new
goes
today.
on forever and ever and ever. You never
I'm
have
gonna
to
have to get
refill
some of
your
that.
bobbins.
Gonna have to get some of that thread today. Deco Bob, before I leave, you're gonna
Okay,
have
we'll
to
show it to you. Yeah.
shop with me and show me exactly what to get. So then, I love triangles. I like simple things, and there's a very traditional quilt block called, here we go, under all of this, 1,000 Pyramids. But I didn't want little pyramids, I wanted big ones, so I sewed 3 strips together. So I had a lot of fun, getting my jelly roll out and then doing the combos. And I sewed the 3 strips together, and then I used this triangle and did you can see, you can cut my triangles.
And so that's the 60-inch
Right.
triangle.
Right. I'm not sure that's the one I use actually, but
No, but that's, we have it out there, the 60-inch one.
some of these triangle rulers I think are just basic rulers you should just have in your stash of rulers, because you don't know when you're going to want to cut a triangle, and it's so much easier to use the markings on the ruler than to do the math. I'm not a real math person.
Like me, it's the easiest way. I mean, and that's why I love your patterns, because they're all easy. I mean, I look at some of these other patterns like, oh, that's too much work.
Right.
Your patterns are always like, oh, I can do this one.
Yeah. So
Let's open this one up. This one's fun.
And I it has a bumblebee border because I called it Mountain Meadows because every summer I go to the
I think we have the pyramids upside
go
down.
to Canoga in Hendersonville, North Carolina for the vacation. And the flowers are always in bloom, and this jelly roll had a lot of daisies and other flowers in it. So I decided to call it Mountain Meadows in memory of Canoga. And of course the bees are always around the flowers.
Oh, God, that's so cool.
I know, it was really fun to sew this.
It's so bright and cheery.
Yes. And you just take the ruler and you turn it this way and this way, so you have no waste. And the ends are also cut off.
And so then the background fabric is the same way.
Yeah, you cut the background the same way. So this was a lot of fun to make.
And which pattern did you use for this?
This is Ginger Flowers.
Yes, because it's so geometric, and I wanted to call it Mountain Meadows, we did the flowers. Although there was a flower print, I wanted to echo that in the quilting.
It kind of echoes the line with the busy bees.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's really fun that way.
Yeah, so I've had this fabric. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sue, when you have a quilt, are you looking to see like that triangle has some what I would consider hard straight lines, and that you did a curvy quilting on that? Does that come into play with your decisions?
It does. Generally, I don't use straight lines where it's going to have any conflict with the quilt. So you don't want it to bring attention to any wonkiness on either my part of quilting. But this one, because it had so many triangles and it was called Mountain Meadow, it just seemed like there had to be something with flowers. There's a series of long arm designs: Ginger Flowers, Ginger Hearts, Ginger Snap. I love them all. And so this was a great opportunity to use that.
Yeah.
I was going to say also, Jean Ann, after working together, I know she likes bright thread, and she also loves feathers. And so that opens up for lots of feather designs, but the combination of, say, the flowers and the curves, which aren't feathery, but have kind of that vibe.
Yeah.
Yep.
So then, while I was working on the book, I was also working on a new ruler with creative grids, the wonky log cabin. So this jelly roll was in my jelly roll stash. I don't know how long I've had it, but I decided to make this, I guess it's called Straight Furrows log cabin. And so this was a lot of fun to make. One jelly roll made 25 blocks. And then I used white, and then in my stash, because you know we always have a stash, I had some of these sort of lime greeny and white pieces left over from a previous project. So I decided that I would use them up and incorporate them in this quilt.
So where the whites is, you put a little bit of something
Occasionally I just threw it in.
Yeah,
to give it a
really
more,
breaks up the neutral background.
right,
Yeah.
and to give it a scrappy look. I love scrap quilts. Given any choice, I will always make a scrap quilt. I'm looking for my wonky that's unwrapped.
I have mine. that you
Okay.
can see.
So we did that, and I've since made 2 more quilts, and my 2 granddaughters that are 6 and 4 are each going to get a quilt out of that. So you can see there's my wonky, and once again it's so geometric that Sue chose what I call a swirly.
Talk just a minute about how you use the wonky log cabin ruler.
Yes, you start out, as with all of my rulers, with a center square, and you sew around the first row around your center square, and then it says here round 1A, and you cut it with that. You trim it. So I used the full width of the jelly roll strip, which is 2.5 inches, as I sewed this together. But then I trimmed off the excess. And then I sewed 2 more rows on. And
you turn it. You actually turn
turn
the
the
ruler
ruler.
around.
yeah, and then I trimmed the other 2 sides. So I'm trying to get it. Here's how I did it. And trim the other 2 sides. And then you add the second round of strips. Log cabin quilts are sewn in rounds. So this is the center, and this was the first round. And then this was the second round. So I sewed the whole second round on and trimmed the second round, again using the ruler. The instructions tell you how to do it very precisely, because again, I don't like to read instructions, so I make sure you have enough pictures and diagrams to do it. And then I did the third round, which was out here. And that finished the log cabin wonky block. Again, I use a whole jelly roll for the prints, and I use yardage and then a few leftover strips from a previous project that happened to have the lime green, just to kind of mix up the background a little bit, give it a little more interest.
And to talk about the rulers that she's designed and for creative grids, one of the things I found is, I mean, this is the final template. I actually got the one in progress,
Right.
And didn't have the
Any
luxury of
markings.
of any markings or instructions from creative grids, because what I found is on all of the rulers that I've worked with Jean Ann is if you take the QR code or the instructions that they include with it and follow them very carefully, and I read, okay, I'm on step 1, I'm step 2. They're very easy to follow, but again, it's visual. Okay, round 1, here's where you put. Here's round 1A. Here's round 1B. Here's round 3. And it makes it very easy to follow, but it's not necessarily intuitive, but the instructions are very clearly written, and Creative Grids does an absolutely wonderful job of including the instructions both
Right.
there and on a YouTube. Yeah.
And I discovered even if you lose your instructions, you can go online and download them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's good. And I also use a lot of times this rotating cutting mat, because when you're going to turn your block, instead of picking it up, I like to just rotate my mat.
Yeah, I do the same thing.
Works much better that way. So all of these little helps I use all of the time, so I feel like the investment is well worthwhile.
Okay.
Yeah. So
What else do we have here? This one you use.
Yeah, and this one I used the little tiny log cabin thing. Once again, you went around 3 times around the center square, and you finish it. Here is the center square right there.
Here's your
strips.
Here's your first one here.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I have the log cabin trim tool in a 4, 6, 10, and 12-inch size. So you can make any size you like.
We also have a curvy log cabin, don't you?
Yes, and I have a curvy log cabin, which I did not use in the book. I don't know why. I think it's because I did a whole book on curvy log cabin quilts.
I was going to
At
say,
one time.
which I did. I just made a sample recently with the curvy log cabin one.
Mm-hmm. So, and then I had fun. I really had fun doing this. I don't know why. There are some blocks I just love making, and that was this Tulip Pink. I fell in love with her. I was up here one day shopping for something else and fell in love with her fabric.
I think you were dropping quilts off for
something.
a fursuit. Yeah. It's a dangerous combination. You're dropping quilts off, and we just happen to entice you with fun
Chris
fabrics.
will tell you that when I was in here a month ago, I almost had to take a bank loan to walk out the door, didn't I?
Yeah.
So, anyways, this was the Tulip Pink, and once again, it was just cutting the strips. So I cut each strip 6.5 inches long, and had my 2.5-inch square, sewed the strips to either side, and I did not square off the point at that point, and then I sewed one of these 6.5-inch to each side of a triangle. You can't tell from the sewing, but here's the square. So I had cut the triangles, and I cut them all too large, okay? Because then I took my 8-inch ruler, and when I was done, that's when I cut. That's what it looked like. Then you can see where I placed the ruler, and when I cut it, trimmed it, it looked like that. So it was much easier to do it that way than to try to cut a 6-inch piece and then cut the, the angled ends.
But you can see how detailed her instructions are in the book.
And this is another great beginner quilt. It looks much more complicated than it is.
And your publisher just did beautiful pictures.
Oh my gosh, I love
They
the
did
photography.
yeah, it's a great, really nicely done. So that was like, again, Landauer. You worked with Landauer
Right.
and Fox Chapel for this one.
Right, and they did all the photography, and they did a beautiful job. They're all kind of set here. And what I like about this is with the chair, you get an idea of the size of the quilt when they've got it sitting in this with this chair. Every one of them is set the same way, not the same chair, but you can see. So they put a lot of thought into it, and it really looks fantastic, the photography. And I like the way they laid out my diagram.
And Sue, on this one you did circles. I mean,
I did. I used loose threads, which is
let's see
a pattern I just love.
What the big one is that it?
This is it right here.
She's so organized. We're obviously not related. So that was fun.
But
Again, it's got lots of crisscross, obviously, and the threads also cross each other, and it adds a little bit of a curve to a straight, the straight lines of the quilt.
And I really like the fact that you're using a current modern jelly roll on this. It's, a Tulip Pink one. But look at this fabric that you pick. I mean, it's not like your fabric for your borders has to matchy match. That you pick something that just
It was in my stash.
gives the spirit of the quilt without being matchy.
And I can tell you it's at least 10 years old because I moved it up here from Georgia when I moved here. And I never used it. I just loved it when I bought it. And so there it is. You're right. You don't have to be matchy. You just kind of have to, I could say, complement or have it all smooth together, because I didn't use the bumblebees in the quilt either, but
it's perfect for
perfect for this quilt. And so that's part of it, is deciding what is your favorite.
Yeah.
What's your border going to be? And the same thing with the checkers quilt. I used kind of a funny, and I used, let me see, where did we put checkers?
Kyle, do we have any questions?
She's been taking care of all of them.
Well, don't take care of all our questions over there.
Sorry.
You can see
I'm
I
very excited about all the quilts. It's beautiful, getting great, lots of love.
so this was a kind of a funny,
That looks like a mid-century, like you've had it for a while.
and you notice there's no lavender in the quilt, but if I didn't point that out to you, you would never say, why did she use lavender in her border? It just worked.
Well, the same with like this, this mustard color. It's just
Yeah, it had the mustard color.
for a very neutral quilt, you needed that little bit of pop of color to go.
And then I
with
had
it.
Sue pick out a color thread that was more
Yeah.
brownish. Would you say kind of copper?
Yes. Yes.
Color
and so
thread.
That's one of the things that we do is, this is for the Wonky Log Cabin. She sends me a piece of paper with suggestions, notes, tells me what she's looking for. This one I love also. This is fresco feathers. And in this one, I think she just said, let's do a thread that pulls it all together. And so she gives me the hints, and
You come
go
shopping.
from there.
Right. So it's really nice to have a long arm quilter that you've worked with for a long time and that you have great confidence in, because you know that you can just give them suggestions and they're going to do something that you really like.
So now that your book is finished and your Wonky Log Cabin's been out there, what are you working on next?
Well, I am working on another ruler, which, as you know, Creative Grids won't let me, they probably don't even want me to tell you I'm working on a ruler. But I am, but it won't be out until either fall or maybe even next winter.
Okay, so I'll probably see it
You'll see it before
late
then.
summer or whatever to
Yes.
make some samples. Yeah.
Yes, Miss Tester, you will. Because it's very important. when
It's
we-
nice to have a creative community where you're not sending stuff off to other people. That we actually have people that are local who can partner together.
Right. Well, they like me to have my ruler testers for my rulers. One person who's experienced, that's you,
Oh.
and one person who is not, who is my cousin Audrey in Arizona.
Okay.
So I'm going to have to get her to watch this now that she's been mentioned. And she's my sort of novice person.
Okay.
Because I want to make sure the ruler can be used both by novice quilters and will be enjoyed by experienced quilters.
Okay.
And the same thing with the book. It's
Because I think I tested your pineapple one. I tested, I think, the curvy log cabin maybe,
Correct.
and the wonky log cabin.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I had you test the 10-inch log cabin or not. But anyways, again, this is just, look at how simple these quilts are, but so much fun to make. And this is one that I did not bring today. I got that all done, and then I thought, why didn't I use a black background? It would have looked more Amish.
Oh.
So I might have to make it over again with solid color pieces and a black background.
It looks very like 30-ish, like the
Right.
seeds. What do they call the seed packets or
Exactly.
yeah, fabrics?
And in fact, when I was a little tiny girl, my mother made my clothes out of those seed bags, our play clothes, because anyway, we had chickens, that's all I can tell you. We had a chicken coop and we lived in the country. So once again, you can see how carefully my instructions are done because I want everyone to be successful. It's not any fun if you're not successful. And this is a more complicated pattern. I wouldn't use this one on a beginner, but if a beginner tried one or two of the other quilts, they could definitely move on to this one.
Well, I think it's nice because looking through the book, you actually do say is the skill level,
Right.
what blocks are used, materials and tools, so it's very clear what you need to go into it. Because you are using different rulers.
Right.
And some books are all one ruler. You know, I know I use the stripology ruler for a lot of them, but this is. It does take some different rulers, but all of them are useful ones to have in your toolbox.
And you can use that stripology ruler
for a lot of them, yeah.
to even cut your own strips. But, I mean, why would you cut your own strips?
Because sometimes you just have some great yarn.
But what I use mine for is that here's the stripology. All of these quilts, you can see that I used yardage for the background, a white yardage. And I used yardage, not a jelly roll, to do, for instance, these pieces of, in the sashing. This was in the jelly roll, this was not. So I used that stripology ruler to cut those pieces.
Well, and I use the stripology, the XL one, because it's also got great markings on it to square up your blocks.
Right.
So if you've got different size blocks, it's a great way to square up your
Exactly.
blocks.
So all of that makes quilting a lot more fun, a lot easier, and if you're like me and you have more fabric that you can possibly use before you die.
But you can still come and buy more. Because we always have more to...
I did.
Well,
I said,
I'm the same way. Every
Chris
time I
checked
walk
me out.
in, it's like, okay, what's new?
Chris checked me out when I thought I was going to have to take a bank loan last time because you had a new collection and I just had to have fat quarters and strips.
Because you just didn't know what you were going to do.
I didn't know what I was going to do with it, so...
But I will say, if you have a collection of jelly rolls, this book has a little something for every type, color,
Oh, yeah.
design of the jelly roll quilt that
I mean,
you
some
want.
are really like modern quilts.
Right.
I mean, this one you could see just using solid colors. You know, like I think I pulled,
A solid color.
you know, a Kona solid color roll would be fun with a number of these. I mean, we've got Tilda ones would give it a whole different look.
That's what I spent all my money on the last time I was here.
Well, we need to see one of those then.
It's coming.
Okay. We've got this. I think this would be great. This is a Prairie Song by Leslie Tucker
I like that.
Jennison.
Yeah, those are my colors. You can see that I'm wearing them.
Okay, maybe you'll go home with that today. And then actually, this is a great one. It's the low volume design roll that then you could use for your backgrounds. So there are lots of options.
Yes, I'm glad to see these because I do like to use light backgrounds. And if you're making a scrappy quilt, I usually end up. I was fortunate that I had some of these little lime green
They work
pieces,
perfectly, yeah.
But I would much rather use this than to just use yardage and have it all be white.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we've got lots of options.
I'm going home with this, Chris.
You know I'm the chief enabler here.
I see that. You're just going to make...
All right.
That's
this
it.
was wonderful. This was really fun. unfortunately had not seen the book until today because I haven't been in as much as I usually am, but I'm kind of excited and trying to decide which jelly roll I might work on next for a shop sample.
I think you need several, actually. If I'm going to get several, you have to.
Oh, all right.
Because you're the one who tempted me.
Okay, all right.
But this is definitely going home with me.
Okay.
Lots of love, ladies. Lots of love. They love the quilts. Love the fact that Sue was here. Put a different spin on it. So very, very happy. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you very
And then
much.
next week is National Quilting Day, and so we've got a special. I think we're doing a share on Saturday. Our staff is bringing in the projects because it's also National Quilting Month, but it's also National Craft Month, and we have people who do both mixed media as well as quilts and fiber art. So we're going to do a little show and tell share on Saturday to kind of show the breadth of what our staff does here and the experience they bring. So it's not just me doing quilts and Judy doing her art quilts. We've got a lot of talent in the shop, and that's what we're going to show off next week. So join us for National Quilting Day. And watch for our newsletter. We've got some specials coming out this Wednesday. So if you haven't signed up for the newsletter, that's the most reliable way to keep in touch with us. Algorithms on social media don't allow as much into your mailbox as our newsletter does. So you can sign up for the newsletter online. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for coming in so early on a Saturday morning.
And
I'll go shop.
Yeah, I have an idea for other books, so I may be back in a year or more. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.